Everyone credits Borderlands with inventing the looter-shooter genre, and to be fair, it was the first to really popularize the formula. Randomized loot, RPG-style character builds, and cooperative gameplay, Borderlands brought all those elements together in a way that really stuck. But what if I told you that it wasn't the first? Before Borderlands, before Destiny, and before The Division, there was Hellgate London. Released in 2007 by Flagship Studios, a team made up of former Diablo developers, Hellgate was an ambitious attempt to merge first-person shooting with action RPG mechanics. It had procedurally generated weapons, randomized loot, class-based builds, and even a hub-based multiplayer system that feels familiar to what Bungie would do later with Destiny. In many ways, it was trying to be Diablo, but in a futuristic, demon-infested London, viewed through a shooter-style gameplay rather than the isometric-style gameplay that Diablo is known for. On paper, it had everything a looter-shooter could: fast-paced combat, deep character customization, and an endless cycle of looting and upgrading. But in reality, Hellgate London was one of the biggest disasters in PC gaming history. A botched launch, technical issues, and one of the worst business models imaginable sent the game crashing down almost immediately. Within a year of release, the studio was bankrupt and Hellgate was abandoned, left to be forgotten as the industry moved on. But while it failed, its ideas lived on. Modern looter shooters owe more to Hellgate than most people realize, from randomized loot and FPS combat to hub-based multiplayer progression. This is the story of how Hellgate London tried to be the future of gaming and how it still left its mark, even if no one talks about it anymore. To understand the ambition behind Hellgate London, you need to know the people who created it. In 2003, a group of key developers from Blizzard North, the studio behind the iconic Diablo series, left the company due to disputes with their parent company, Vivendi. Industry veterans like David Brevik, Max Schaefer, Eric Schaefer, and Bill Roper. These individuals had been instrumental in shaping the action RPG genre with Diablo and Diablo 2. Games renowned for their dark atmospheres, addictive loot systems, and seamless blends of action and role-playing elements. Seeking creative freedoms and new challenges, they founded Flagship Studios in 2003. The goal was to innovate within the action RPG space by combining their expertise in randomized loot systems and dungeon crawling with a fresh setting and perspective. Their initial project, Hellgate London, aimed to merge the addictive loot-driven gameplay of Diablo with an immersive experience of a first-person shooter set against the backdrop of post-apocalyptic London. The influence of Diablo on Hellgate London is unmistakable. Both games feature procedurally generated environments, a hallmark of the roguelike genre, ensuring that no two playthroughs are identical. This design choice was intended to provide players with endless replayability, a core philosophy carried over from their work on Diablo. Additionally, Hellgate incorporated a deep and intricate loot system, offering a vast array of weapons, armor, and items with varying attributes and rarities, encouraging players to continually seek out better gear, a concept central to the looter-shooter genre that would emerge years later. However, Hellgate London was not merely a Diablo clone in a new skin. The team at Flagship sought to push boundaries by integrating real-time combat mechanics typical of first-person and third-person shooters, a significant departure from the point-and-click mechanics of a traditional action RPG. This hybrid approach required players to rely on both their character's stats and their own reflexes, blending skill-based gameplay with RPG progression, a combination that would later become a defining characteristic of the looter-shooter genre. In essence, the formation of Flagship Studios by former Blizzard North developers was a pivotal moment that set the stage for Hellgate London. Their pedigree in crafting compelling action RPGs laid the foundation for an ambitious project that sought to innovate by merging genres, ultimately influencing the evolution of looter shooters in the years to come. Hey, if you're enjoying the video, please feel free to subscribe and like. But anyways, let's get back into the original looter shooter. At its core, Hellgate London sought to merge the precision and immediacy of first-person and third-person shooters with the depth and replayability of action RPGs. Players could switch between perspectives, utilizing firearms between weapons and magical attacks depending on their chosen class. This flexibility allowed for varied combat experiences, catering to different playstyles and preferences. The game featured 6 distinct classes, divided among 3 factions, each offering unique abilities and playstyles. Drawing inspiration from Diablo, Hellgate London featured a robust randomized loot system. Weapons, armor, and items dropped with varying attributes and rarities, encouraging players to continually seek better gear. This system fed into the game's core loop of defeating enemies, acquiring loot, and enhancing character capabilities, providing a compelling incentive to explore and engage in combat. To keep the experience fresh, the game utilized procedurally generated levels. This meant that the environments, enemy placements, and loot drops varied with each playthrough, ensuring that no 2 sessions were identical. This design choice aimed to enhance replayability and maintain player engagement over time. Hellgate London also incorporated multiplayer features reminiscent of MMOs. Players could gather in safe zones, specifically repurposed London Underground stations, serving as hubs for social interaction, quest acquisition, and trade. From these hubs, they could venture into instant dungeons, either solo or in cooperative groups, facing challenges scaled to party size. This structure promoted teamwork and community engagement, blending single-player narrative elements with shared multiplayer experiences. Hellgate London is set in a post-apocalyptic version of 2038 London, where demons have taken over the city, forcing humanity underground. The game's story plays out over multiple missions, with players working to seal the Hellgate and push back the demon threat. It's standard sci-fi fantasy fare, secret artifacts, ancient prophecies, and a last-ditch fight for survival. Nothing groundbreaking, but it does do the job. The setting is what really sells it, mixing dark fantasy with sci-fi tech, which gives it a unique identity. Think Doom meets Warhammer 40k, but in London. The atmosphere is what Hellgate does best. The city is in ruins, demons are everywhere, and the game leans into a dark, eerie tone. Even if the story itself isn't anything special, the world at least feels distinct. At the end of the day, the narrative is more of an excuse to get you looting and shooting. It's not the reason people remember Hellgate, but it's a solid enough foundation for the gameplay to build upon. Hellgate London hit the shelves on October 31st, 2007, but instead of a triumphant debut, it stumbled right out of the gate. Despite the pedigree of its developers, the game was riddled with issues that quickly soured both critics and players. Before launch, Hellgate London was riding a wave of high expectations. Previews painted it as this groundbreaking blend of FPS action and RPG depth, set in a richly imagined setting. Gamers were eager for what seemed like the next big thing. One of the most baffling decisions was the game's business model. Hellgate launched as a full-price game, but also offered a subscription service that promised additional content and features. This hybrid approach confused consumers. Many couldn't understand why they needed to pay extra on top of the retail price, especially when the base game felt incomplete. The subscription didn't offer enough value to justify its cost, leading to frustration and a sense of being nickeled and dimed. Technical problems also plagued Hellgate from day one. Players encountered frequent crashes, performance issues, and a slew of bugs that hampered gameplay. Some couldn't even get the game to start without diving into compatibility settings or running executables directly from installation folders. The game's forums and support channels were flooded with complaints, creating a PR nightmare for Flagship Studios. Moreover, the content that was available felt half-baked. Many quests were repetitive, environments lacked variety, and the promised depth of gameplay was nowhere to be found. It became evident that the game had been rushed to the market before it was ready, a fact later acknowledged by Flagship CEO Bill Roper. The disastrous launch had immediate consequences. Sales figures were disappointing and the player base dwindled rapidly. The negative reception not only tarnished the game's reputation, but also strained Flagship Studios' finances. Attempts to secure additional funding fell through, and the studio faced massive layoffs. By July 2008, less than a year after the game's release, Flagship Studios had closed its doors and Hellgate London was left in limbo. In hindsight, Hellgate London's launch serves as a very cautionary tale about overambition, poor planning, and the critical importance of delivering a polished product. The game's failure not only led to the demise of a promising studio, but also heighten the challenges of blending genres and meeting player expectations in a very increasingly competitive market. This is something that games have still not learned from, and after each case, they still don't seem to learn, and it's probably just going to keep happening forever. In 2024, original creator Bill Roper announced a new Hellgate project under his studio, Lunacy Games, signaling a potential revival of the franchise. Despite its initial failure, Hellgate London has maintained a cult following, with ongoing interest in its potential revival. Hellgate London's ambition did not go unnoticed, industry professionals have acknowledged its role in shaping the looter shooter genre. For instance, the game's innovative approach to combining looting mechanics with shooter gameplay has been recognized as a precursor to later successful titles in the genre. Its experimental fusion of the genres and mechanics established a foundation that looter shooters would build on for years to come. Hellgate had everything it needed to be a hit: an ambitious concept, a team of veteran developers, and mechanics that were years ahead of their time. It was one of the first games to truly blend shooter gameplay with RPG-style loot. But ambition alone does not guarantee success. A rushed launch, game-breaking bugs, and a disastrous business model crushed Hellgate before it even had a chance to grow. Flagship Studios, despite being led by some of the minds behind Diablo, collapsed less than a year after release, and Hellgate became one of gaming's biggest cautionary tales. That said, its influence is undeniable. Many of its ideas became standard in later games, and if Hellgate London had launched in a more polished state, or maybe had better financial backing, we might be talking about it as one of the defining franchises of modern gaming, rather than a forgotten experiment. Could it work today? Absolutely. With the right execution, Hellgate could thrive in an era where looter shooters dominate the industry. Maybe it was just ahead of its time, and with recent talk of a potential revival, who knows? We may not have seen the last of Hellgate London after all. Well, that was Hellgate London. If you enjoyed the video and you made it this far, please feel free to subscribe and like the video. It means a ton. We're always checking out old games here. And if you're interested in more reviews, we do that too, as well as the That's Kinda Mid podcast, where me and my friend Sam kind of go back and either look at something that just came out, or we might revisit something that was a little cool or a little relevant to what's coming out now. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video.